You're tuned into the Spot Up Pod, the official podcast of the Spot Up Shot newsletter. I'm your host, Paul Garcia. Good Saturday morning. Let's jump right into another episode of the Spot Up Pod. So there was some news on Friday. The Spurs announced some different injury updates for a few players on the roster. Two players who are expected to be in their core rotation. And then also they made a smaller a waiving of a player. And I also didn't address this on the podcast, the signing of that particular player. So let's go and jump right into this episode. So on Friday afternoon, the Spurs announced injury updates for three different players on the roster: Devin Vassell, Zach Collins, and Charles Bassey. So let's first begin with Vassell, because we know that he's expected to be in the starting lineup for the Spurs, and he's actually going to be out the longest out of these three players. So basically what they announced was that, Devin is participating in non-contact basketball activities, and he is expected to miss the start of the season. They are going to provide an update on November 1st. So basically, by November 1st, at minimum, Devin then is going to miss all of training camp. He's going to miss all of the preseason, which is 5 games, plus he'll miss the Spurs' first 5 regular season games, which are against the Dallas Mavericks, the Houston Rockets twice, the Oklahoma City Thunder, and also the Utah Jazz. So again, at that point on November 1st, they'll provide another update. So again, it's not guaranteed that Devin's going to return to the court by November 1st. They're just going to provide an update to Spurs. So again, he could miss 5 or more games here to start the regular season for the Spurs, and that's a huge blow for the team, because Devin is their second leading scorer behind Wemby. He's one of the creators. One of their best shooters out of the perimeter, and he's one of those players who's expected to make another leap in this coming season. So that is a huge injury issue for San Antonio, at least to start the season. Luckily for them, he's not out for the full season. He's gonna make his return a few weeks into the season. So it's unfortunate though that he does have to begin the season on the injured list. So what happened to Devin? Basically, he underwent off-season surgery on a stress reaction of the third metatarsal head on his right foot, where he had to miss the final 8 games of last season. So again, it was an injury dating back from last season that he had some surgery on, and now he has to miss some games here to begin the regular season of the new season for the Spurs. And I'll talk more about who's going to possibly fill Devin's position here in a little bit in the same segment. Now let's talk about Zach Collins and Charles Bassey's injuries as well. So Zach Collins, according to the Spurs, he has been cleared for all basketball activities, and according to the team, he's also expected to be available for the Spurs' season opener against Dallas on October 24th. So again, basically the Spurs are saying here that Zach's he's going to miss training camp, he's going to miss the 5 preseason games, but he should be ready to go by opening night, which is October 24th. And Collins as well, he's returning from an injury from last season where he had a dislocated shoulder injury that did require surgery as well. So Collins should be ready at least for the regular season, which we do expect him to most likely be the backup center behind Wemby if he's ready by opening night. And then lastly, Charles Bassey, who the Spurs re-signed this offseason. According to the Spurs, here's what they say, that he's ramping up progressively to live play, and he too is expected to be ready for October 24th season opener against Dallas. So just regarding Bassey, we know that last season, he was having a pretty good year to start the year off the bench as the backup big for the Spurs. And then unfortunately, he tore his ACL. And so that put him on the injured list for the remainder of the season. And so Bassey, too, should be ready to go by opening night, according to the team, is what again, the keywords are expected, because, we don't know, maybe a player heals faster and gets through the recovery faster. So maybe they return quicker to the court, or maybe there are some setbacks, unfortunately, in the recovery process, and so it could be a little bit later of a date for either Collins or Bassey. So again, those are the injury updates that the team did provide on Friday afternoon, and that's key, because that kind of gets into some different questions about who's going to fill the roles of those 3 players, at least to start training camp and the preseason, and then specifically for Vassell, the first few games of the regular season. So that's kind of where I want to take this conversation now, is just looking at some possible options for Vassell replacements in the starting lineup until he makes his return. So one of the first players I want to start with is basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to name some players, and then I want to give some like positives of why this player might fit as why the Spurs should give this player the starting shooting guard spot job, or maybe not, because here's the reasons probably why not. And again, there's different reasons for every single player here. So the first player is Keldon Johnson. So we know that Keldon, he's typically more so like he plays more like a small ball power forward. He can also play more so the small forward kind of role. So he's more so just the fact that he's a wing, he should be okay if he had a start, because I know he's not a shooting guard, but the fact that he plays out on the wing, he kind of knows, how to run the sets in the half court offense at the wing position. So some of the positives that Keldon would provide to the starting unit is that he's going to bring you scoring, whether it's shooting from the outside, even though his percentage has had some difficulty being consistent over the last few seasons, or he's one of those players who can try to get to the free throw line, try to attack the rim whenever he tries to drive the ball against the defense. So that's where I think that if you need a scoring punch, I think the Spurs would go with Keldon Johnson, because again, they're losing Devin Vassell is almost like 20 points per game. So maybe they go to Keldon to elevate his role. And with, even though, yes, he's a starter alongside Wemby and Chris Paul and Sohan and Barnes, after Wemby, Keldon would probably be the second go-to scorer for this unit in the starting lineup. If he did start. And then also he would be able to keep his similar usage, I think, similar to what he has on the bench. So again, Keldon's going to bring you more so that scoring punch if that's what you want in the starting unit. One of the questions, though, if you start Keldon, is that who's going to be that go-to player off the bench, because then now you're taking Keldon out of the bench lineup, and so now it's going to be that's going to fall on the shoulders of some of the other players who are on the bench to try to produce points off the bench consistently, or those 5 players that come off kind of working together to try to score or to equate those 14 to 15 points that Keldon can provide each night off the bench. And then also a big key for Keldon if he does start is how much has his 3-point shot improved, because again, that was one of the issues with his season last season, was that his 3-point shot could be sort of like a roller coaster, where it went in a few times, it kind of didn't stay stable, and so that's something to watch is how much did he improve his 3-point shot over the offseason. If he did improve it, then that's great, because now he's going to provide some spacing when teams like double team or triple team Wemby, and so that's a key question for Keldon. So again, Keldon's one of the first options maybe the Spurs might look at as for that starting spot. Another player who could get the starting spot potentially is Stephon Castle, the rookie that the Spurs drafted with the 4th overall pick. What is Castle going to bring? First of all, the positives. He's going to bring lockdown perimeter defense. We saw some of that in summer league. If you watched him in college at UConn, he could, he can guard a lot of different offensive players out on the perimeter. So that's one thing that it's going to look like an NBA ready skill right away that he's going to bring to the court. So again, if they want a better defender out there, out of the 4 players I'm going to name, he's the best perimeter defender coming in that the Spurs could put out there. Plus, even though they will have Chris Paul starting, running the point guard and running some pick and rolls with Wemby, they can also have Castle, who showed in summer league that he's shown some comfortability running the pick and roll at the NBA level. Again, it was summer league, but right now he did look pretty comfortable out there, and so that could be that gives the Spurs another ball handler. He's going to be able to hold the ball, bring it up, initiate some half court offense, and that's something where he can get that experience as well. Being a point guard, playing alongside Chris Paul, that way Paul doesn't always have to initiate the offense for the team. Maybe Stephon Castle could do that. And then some other positives is that it is going to give him some early experience as a starter, because, had Devin been healthy, I expected, Devin to be the 2, Harrison Barnes the 3, Sohan the 4, and then Wemby the 5, and Chris Paul the 1. That meant Stephon Castle is most likely going to come off the bench if that's how Coach Pop went with the lineups. Well, now, if he gets a starting job, at least for a few weeks while Devin's recovering, then at least gives him the experience of seeing, what does it take at the NBA level to start a game? How do you have to be mentally prepared? How do you have to be ready for this? How do you, figure out your matchups? Those kind of questions he can kind of look at early on and kind of get that experience, so that when Devin comes back, Devin would obviously take his starting spot back. But then whenever the Spurs do need Castle to start again later in the season, he'd be ready to do that right away, because he's got that experience as a starter. I think for him, similar to Keldon, the big question is, his outside shooting. That's the one thing that was one of the knocks on him coming into the draft. And so that's going to be, he made a few at summer league, but again, it's going to be the questions. Defenses are definitely going to test him from out there. And then if you have Castle, who isn't known for his outside shooting, plus a player like Jeremy Sohan, that's a part of his game he's still working on. Is there not enough spacing out there on the floor for Wemby? And so then that becomes a question of how much can they start Castle? Is basically it really comes down to the 3-point shooting for him, and how much he's improved on that in these last few months since he's been waiting for the season to start. Another player who could potentially start for Vassell while he's recovering is Julian Champagnie. And, Julian, there's a lot of reasons for him to start. One, he out of all these players, he actually has that 3-point shot ready to go. That's the one part of his game that's super consistent that the Spurs know they're going to get from him, is that outside shooting threat. He's ready to shoot the ball. He's also a low volume, I would say, usage rate player. So basically, he's not going to take a lot of your offensive possessions, having to create for himself or others. That's going to be more so where he'll allow Victor and Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes and Jeremy Sohan to kind of initiate a lot of the different offensive looks for the team, and he'll kind of just be ready to shoot or move the ball around on the offensive end. And then also he's gonna play some solid defense. Not maybe not the level of defense that Stephon Castle brings, but he's gonna play solid defense, because he definitely impressed Pop last year. The fact that he started out there not only for his shooting, but also because he was a consistent defender out there on the perimeter. So again, those are the positives, reasons why Champagnie might start. The only negative I wrote here was just basically low what if the Spurs need more? The fact that they're missing one of their 20-point per game scorers like Devin, what if they need more creativity offensively? And that's the one thing that Champagnie's not going to bring to the team. So again, that would probably be the only drawback of if they didn't start him, was because he wasn't bringing enough firepower, to that starting lineup. And then the last player who I wrote down here was Malaki Branham. So for Branham, had Vassell been healthy and just basically the full roster been healthy coming into training camp, it looked like Branham and Blake Wesley might have been on the outside of the 10-man rotation. Well, now that Vassell is injured, this actually opens up a good opportunity for Branham to try to show the coaching staff that he's ready to either start or maybe even get one of those roles off the bench at the wing position. And so what do we know about the positives about Branham is that he does have that 3-level scoring ability. He can go through swings of games where he's making threes, or he's getting some mid-rangers, where he might be getting to the rim with some layup opportunities. But the drawback is his consistency. That's the reason why he probably wasn't going to make the 10-man rotation early on, because he just hasn't been consistent through two years in the league. And so that's a question of how much has he improved as well in the offseason, and can he take advantage of this opportunity to either start or maybe get a role off the bench. And then of course we know perimeter defense is also not his calling card, unlike Castle and Champagnie. So that would be another drawback to maybe why he does not start. But again, I think for both Branham and Champagnie, this is a really good opportunity for both players to try to crack the rotation, whether it's in the starting lineup or whether it's getting a role off the bench now for these first few weeks of the season before Devin Vassell makes his return. Because we know that regardless, whether Devin's here or not, Stephon Castle is going to get some minutes somewhere. So is Keldon Johnson. So I think for those other players on the outside, like Champagnie and Branham, this is a good opportunity for them to at least try to, carve out a role for themselves. And then that way they impress the coaching staff. That way when Devin does return and he gets his role back, whether maybe there's a spot for one of those two players off the bench if they've been playing well in training camp and the start of the regular season. So now I want to turn to the second topic, which is basically what Collins and Bassey injured. So luckily for the Spurs, but Bassey and Collins are not expected to be out that long. They should both be back by the regular season. So what they're going to probably miss then is the preseason, is the training camp, those practices, getting to know your teammates kind of thing. And then also the first 5 preseason games. And so for what this creates an opportunity for is other players, toward the end of the roster, who might try to carve out a role for themselves to just for those preseason games, just to be the backup 5 or get some minutes as the backup 4 if somebody else is starting at the backup 5. And so players that I highlighted here are Sandru Mamukelashvili, because again, Mamu kind of looked like he might be on the outside of the rotation had everyone been healthy. And now, he might have to play some small ball 5 in the preseason, but that's an opportunity for him to get some minutes. And then another player who's a rookie is Harrison Ingram. We saw Harrison Ingram play in Summer League with the Spurs. Well, now he gets a shot to possibly, whether it's a small ball 5 role or even that, let's say Mamu gets the backup 5, then Harrison Ingram might be able to compete for that backup 4 role, at least until Bassey and Zach Collins do get healthy. So again, there's an opportunity for 2 players toward the end of the depth part of the roster. And then also some other players to kind of look out for are Sidi Sissoko. Again, he might be able to carve out a role for himself with in that backup power forward role at least for the preseason until Zach Collins and Bassey get back. And also a rookie who's on a training camp contract. So again, this is a really big challenge for him. But Riley Minix as well, he can play a little bit of backup 4. And so there could be an opportunity for him as well in the preseason and training camp to try to impress the coaching staff to see if maybe he can get some minutes as well. And actually try to get a full either standard contract or a 2-way contract with the Spurs. Okay, so now for the final topic, I want to discuss some recent roster move the Spurs made this past week. So on Monday, the Spurs signed Jameer Nelson Jr. to a training camp contract. And then on Friday, they actually waived him. So again, this wasn't too surprising because this is something that a lot of NBA teams do during training camp, is if they have a player in mind that they maybe want to put on their G League team in the future, then what they'll do is they'll sign that player for about a day or two, and then they'll waive that player. That way, whenever the G League roster start getting created, since they had that player on their team at one point, they're actually able to add that player to their G League team. So again, I think this move to sign Jameer Nelson Jr. for a week and then waive him was probably to get him on the Austin Spurs. So again, if he can't find a spot on another NBA team, it's likely he'll probably end up on the Austin Spurs roster whenever the G League season starts. We did see Nelson Jr. play in the Summer League for a few games with the Spurs. He wasn't really one of the go-to point guards for the team. Again, early on when Stephon Castle was healthy in Summer League, they let him run the point guard. Then they had Jamari Bouye run most of the point guard up in Vegas for most of that time before Bouye just got waived a few weeks ago. So again, Nelson Jr. is most likely going to end up in Austin is what it looks like, with the reason why they did that deal. But this does mean, since he got waived on Friday, that the Spurs again have one open roster spot. So what they can do with that roster spot is they can either sign another player on a training camp contract, or they can sign a player to a 2-way contract. So again, that's what they can do with that spot. And now knowing that they don't have Bassey and Collins for at least preseason and training camp. I wonder now if this makes the Spurs go out and find a big. So again, one big who hasn't been signed by the Spurs yet, but he was reportedly supposed to get signed back in late July, was Nathan Mensah. He was on the Spurs' summer league team. And he's a big who's had some experience, I believe, with the Hornets. And so he's more so like a shot blocking kind of defensive big. He's not going to give you a lot on offense, but Mensah could be a player that maybe the Spurs signed to either a training camp contract for the preseason and training camp, or maybe a two-way contract just to have more depth there at the 5, because they do see that they're without both of their backup centers right now in Collins and Bassey, at least to start the preseason before the regular season opens up. So that kind of wraps up this episode. Again, it was just a quick one just to kind of provide some updates on the injury updates that the Spurs mentioned here. Training camp does start officially next week. So all week the Spurs will be practicing, and then from there the following week the preseason game starts. So here we go. It's about to start here. And again, the key question will be, who ends up getting that role, filling that role with Devin Vassell out, and then also by November 1st, we want to see exactly, how long is Vassell still going to be out, or is he ready to return by that point? So again, that could be critical for the Spurs. They can't have Devin missing, too many games, because obviously, they want to get off to a good start. They don't want to fall behind really quickly early on, especially in the conference that they play in, which is the West. And a lot of their easier games against the Eastern Conference don't come until later on, after like November or December. So again, they have a pretty grueling schedule, at least to start the year. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of Spotted Pod. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a rating on your favorite podcast apps and our YouTube channel. The Spotted Pod is recorded and produced by Paul Garcia. The music for this episode was written by Vincent Garcia and Paul Garcia. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.